December 25, 1991. A man sits alone in an office inside the Kremlin. In exactly 11 minutes, he will sign a document that erases a superpower from existence. 7 decades, 15 republics, 280 million people, gone with the stroke of a pen. But the real question is, how did the mightiest empire of the 20th century collapse without a single bullet being fired? Clusterstory. This is Clusterstory, where we take a deep dive into history to get a great understanding of how we got here. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the bell, like and share this video. The Empire of Red. To understand the fall, we must first understand what rose. 1917. The Russian Empire crumbles. From its ashes, Vladimir Lenin builds something the world has never seen before. A communist state. A workers' paradise, they called it. No more emperors, no more nobles, power to the people. But paradise had a price. Joseph Stalin seized control and transformed the Soviet Union into an industrial titan through sheer terror. Millions vanished into gulags. Entire populations were relocated. Famine swept through Ukraine, killing millions more. Yet the factories kept churning, the military kept growing, and by 1945, the Soviet Union stood victorious over Nazi Germany. Half of Europe fell behind what Winston Churchill called the Iron Curtain. The Cold War began. 2 superpowers, 2 ideologies, 1 planet that wasn't big enough for both. For decades, the Soviet Union projected unstoppable strength, nuclear missiles, space exploration, Olympic gold. The hammer and sickle flew over 1/6 of the Earth's land surface. But behind the red curtain, something was rotting. The cracks beneath the surface. The 1970s seemed like the peak of Soviet power, but appearances can be weapons, and the Soviets wielded them masterfully. The truth was darker. Soviet factories produced tanks and missiles, but they couldn't produce blue jeans or quality food. Citizens waited in lines for hours just to buy bread. The economy was a house of cards built on oil exports, and when oil prices collapsed in the 1980s, the cards began to fall. Then came Afghanistan, 1979. Soviet troops invaded to prop up a communist government. What Moscow promised would be a quick operation became a decade-long nightmare. The Mujahideen, armed with American weapons, turned mountain passes into graveyards for Soviet soldiers. Coffins came home in secret. Mothers were told their sons died in training accidents. Afghanistan became the Soviet Vietnam, a war that couldn't be won, a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding, and the empire grew weaker with each passing day. By 1985, the Soviet Union needed a miracle. Instead, it got Mikhail Gorbachev, the reformer's gamble. He was different from every Soviet leader before him. Young, energetic, born after the revolution, Gorbachev looked at his crumbling empire and made a decision that would echo through history. He would try to save communism by changing it. 2 words defined his revolution: glasnost, openness; perestroika, restructuring. For the first time, Soviet citizens could criticize their government without disappearing in the night. Newspapers printed stories about corruption. Television showed the truth about Stalin's crimes. The lies that held the system together began dissolving. In the light of truth, Gorbachev believed that if people could speak freely, they would help fix the system. He was wrong. When people finally spoke, they didn't ask for better communism. They asked why they needed communism at all. They asked why Soviet troops occupied Eastern Europe. They asked why they couldn't travel freely. They asked why their empire had stolen their futures. Gorbachev had opened Pandora's box, and there was no closing it again. The dominoes fall. 1989, the year everything changed. Poland held free elections. A non-communist government took power. Moscow did nothing. Hungary opened its border with Austria. East Germans flooded through, escaping to the west. Moscow did nothing. Then came November 9th. East German authorities, confused and overwhelmed, accidentally announced that the Berlin Wall was open. Thousands rushed to the checkpoints. Guards with no orders to shoot stepped aside. Germans climbed the wall that had divided their nation for 28 years. They danced on top of it. They tore it apart with hammers and bare hands. The world watched in disbelief. And still, Moscow did nothing. Czechoslovakia's communist government fell in weeks. Romania's dictator was executed on Christmas Day. Bulgaria, Albania, Yugoslavia, the entire Soviet Empire in Eastern Europe dissolved in months. Gorbachev had made a fateful choice. He refused to use force to hold the empire together. Previous Soviet leaders had sent tanks into Hungary in '56, into Czechoslovakia in '68. Gorbachev sent nothing. Some called him a hero of peace. Others called him a traitor who surrendered an empire. But the dominoes kept falling, and now they were falling inside the Soviet Union itself. The empire turns on itself 1990. Lithuania declared independence. Then Latvia, Estonia, Georgia, the Soviet republics, held together by force for decades, now demanded freedom. Gorbachev faced an impossible choice: crush the rebellions and become another Stalin, or let the Union dissolve and watch his life's work crumble. He tried to find a middle path: negotiations, compromises. A new Union treaty that would give republics more freedom while keeping them together. But forces on all sides were spinning beyond his control. Russian nationalists, led by a man named Boris Yeltsin, saw their chance. Yeltsin became president of the Russian Republic and began openly defying Gorbachev: two presidents, one country. A collision course with destiny. The hardliners watched in horror. Everything they had built, everything they believed in, was being destroyed. They decided to act. 3 days in August 19, 1991. Gorbachev was on vacation in Crimea when armed men arrived. They told him a state of emergency had been declared. He was under house arrest. In Moscow, tanks rolled through the streets. A committee of hardliners announced they had taken control. The Soviet Union, they declared, would be preserved by force. The world held its breath. But something unexpected happened. The people of Moscow didn't cower. They poured into the streets. They surrounded the Russian parliament building, the White House, forming human chains. And then came the moment that would be remembered forever. Boris Yeltsin climbed onto a tank, defiant, fearless. He denounced the coup as illegal. He called for resistance. Soldiers faced a choice: fire on their own people or stand down. They stood down. Within 3 days, the coup collapsed. Gorbachev returned to Moscow, but he returned to a different world. The coup had destroyed what little authority the Soviet government had left. The republics now rushed for the exit. The final Christmas, December 8, 1991. The leaders of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus met in secret. They signed a document declaring that the Soviet Union had ceased to exist. Gorbachev was not invited. He fought for 2 more weeks, desperately trying to save something, anything. But it was over. December 25th, Christmas Day. Mikhail Gorbachev appeared on television and resigned as president of a country that no longer existed. That night, the red Soviet flag was lowered over the Kremlin for the last time. In its place rose the Russian tricolor. 74 years of communist rule ended not with a bang, but with a signature and a folded flag. The echoes of empire, the Soviet Union vanished, but its ghost still haunts us. 15 new nations emerged from the wreckage. Some embraced democracy. Others fell into dictatorship. Wars erupted in Chechnya, Georgia, and Ukraine conflicts, rooted in borders drawn by Soviet planners. Millions lost their savings overnight. Life expectancy in Russia plummeted. Oligarchs rose from the chaos, seizing industries for pennies. And the question that started this story remains unanswered. Was the Soviet collapse inevitable? Was it the triumph of freedom over tyranny? Or was it the tragedy of a superpower that lost its way? Perhaps it was all of these things. One truth remains certain. When an empire falls, the shockwaves last for generations. We are still living in them. This is Clusterstory. If this journey through history moved you, subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another deep dive. Like this video and share it with someone who needs to understand how we got here. Until next time, remember history isn't just the past, it's the map to our future.